So continuing now, we have this relationship between the man and the woman is literally shown in astrology as the relationship between the sun and the moon. So we have some great guidelines here in the Vedic scriptures, the Vedic astrological scriptures. Read these beautiful descriptions of the sun and the moon. Description of Surya, the sun. Surya's eyes are honey-colored. He has a square body. He is of clean habits, bilious, intelligent, and has limited hair on his head. The description of Chandra, the moon. Chandra is very windy and phlegmatic. She is learned and has a round body. She has auspicious looks and sweet speech, is fickle-minded and very lustful. That usually surprises people, that the lustful nature comes from the woman, from the moon. So here are attributes of the sun and moon, the man and the woman, compared. Those same attributes that we just took from Brihad Parashara Sastra. So the body type, the sun square, the moon round. The process, the sun is intelligence, the moon is knowing. Looks, the sun honey-colored eyes, moon auspicious looks. Constitution, the sun is bilious, fiery, the moon watery and windy. The habits, the sun is clean, the moon is lustful. So I'll go into these attributes. So they're very powerful. Let's talk about a few things. The moon is the most changeable of all the planets, different every day. The round body of the moon shows the woman's changeability and creativity. Feminine energy is about flexibility, creativity, adaptability. And this is the nature of the moon. Every day different, waxing and waning, a little different. The moon is related to water and wind. Well, let's just go with this. She's susceptible to rolling here and there, depending on which way the wind is blowing or other environmental conditions. She's fickle-minded. The square body of the man reassures her. So the moon has a fickle nature. The moon is the mind, manas, the emotional mind, really. And the square body of the man reassures her. A square is a solid structure. It's not so easily moved. Thus, when she's rolling around, she would like to knock into a solid surface. Yet this changeability also makes her creative and adaptable, which helps the man not stay so fixed so as to become rigid. The woman's auspicious looks attract the man's honey-colored eyes. Women want the man's attention and like to attract it. Of course, men like to look at women. The woman's sweet speech and knowing attracts and supports the man's intelligence. Her knowing is of the heart, his intelligence of the mind. Of course, people have all four elements and qualities of the sun, moon, and every other planet. But in relationships, as we say, the woman wants to surrender her moon to the man's sun, and he wants to give his sun to her moon. She surrenders her heart to him, and he surrenders his power to her or not. So learning how to do this dance gracefully without the woman feeling abused and or the man feeling powerless is the trick. Now, go back to these traits again. It's quite profound, and this is, straight from the Vedic wisdom of how masculine and feminine energy interact. We have to realize something. The sun and the moon are the reason there's life on Earth. Without the sun or the moon, there'd be no life. So this is not just poetry. On a deep level, it's science as well. The sun is the power. Without the sun, there'd be nothing. There'd be no power. And so every being that's ever existed has existed due to the power of the sun. If the sun were to explode or fly out of its orbit or something, everything would be dead immediately. But it's not just the sun. It's the moon, the creative principle, that makes the sun's energy create life. So the sun gives the power, but without the moon, there's no matrix of energy. It's the moon's orbit around the Earth that regulates the seasons, regulates the oceans, and creates creatures. It's the moon. Without the moon's orbit, everything would be dead also. So both of them are the archetype of masculine and feminine energy, not just poetically, but in truth. This is the deepest part of astrology, is it explains the physical universe first. Most people don't realize this, but all the Vedic deities, all the Hindu deities, all of the yin-yang, the archetype of Shiva and Shakti, and all this is literally just a way to represent the sun and the moon. The Vedic rishis knew that our mind would understand deities and stories and things with faces a lot easier than the sun and the moon, because they seem so distant. But that's all the sun and the moon are. Well, I say that's all they are. That's what creates life, the sun and the moon. And so they also have this masculine and feminine archetype. Shiva and Shakti literally are the sun and moon. So these attributes are very powerful to show us how masculine and feminine energy interact on all levels, not just in relationships, but within us as well. This is what we're talking about in this stellar relationships when we're looking at the elements and the planets and what they form through us. So the square of the sun is the most consistent. The sun is the most consistent energy. All the time it's there. So the moon, as I say, is the most inconsistent. So it's reassured by the sun. The power of the moon comes from the fire of the sun, the intelligence of the sun. When the sun comes up, we have discrimination. We can see the truth, the clarity. But the knowing of the moon is what integrates things through our feelings, through our heart. Knowing is internal. Intelligence is external. The honey-colored eyes, the auspicious looks of the moon. The constitution, bilious, fiery, and watery and windy. We have to understand this. Watery and windy is the moon. When the moon is full, it's very watery, which means it's grounded in that sense of love, patience, connection. But when the moon gets dark, when it gets close to the sun in the sky, literally it becomes windy. So the moon is related to Kapha and Vata, which means water and wind. In an astrological chart, literally, when the sun is close to the moon, the mind becomes jittery. It becomes Vata-like. It has a lot of wind. So you can imagine the relationship between the sun and the moon like having a pot of water on the stove. If you have a pot of water and it's full to the top, it's going to take a long time for it to boil. Let's say it's a gallon pot. A gallon of water is going to take a long time to boil. But if you have a gallon pot and you only have 2 ounces of water in it, it's not going to take very long to boil. And this is what it's like when the moon is dark. So this is why the moon is watery and windy. It's watery when it's full, and it brings peace, love, patience, connection. But when it's too close to the sun, too fiery, it actually creates wind. So an aggravated moon creates Vata, creates fear, anxiety, because the fire is burning out the water. This is an Ayurvedic principle. Fire consumes water and creates air, like we said in the earlier lessons. Fire is what eats the food. Water is the food. And when fire eats it, it creates wind, which is Vata, which is movement, motion. This is how the elements work. And so the habits, the sun is clean. The sun and the moon is lustful. Again, this is one people have a hard time with because they say, well, men are lustful. Men can be sexually lustful, but the man's or masculine energy is more oriented towards things that are clean and neat and pure. They want the truth. They want the truth, the pure thing that doesn't have impurities. This is the nature of the sun, and heat is to burn off impurities. This is the nature of the sun. Lustful nature of the moon is the desire to be connected. It's the emotional lust. It doesn't mean sexual lust. It means the longing for connection comes from the moon. And women tend to typify that quality more, that longing to be connected. This is the lustful quality of the moon. And so this battle between the clarity and consistency and cleanliness of the sun and the lustfulness of the moon wanting to feel connected is what that means. This is a tricky one. Oftentimes women don't like to hear this. And it's not a judgment on women, because women also have a powerful sun and moon. Everyone has all of these attributes. But often in relationships what happens is the man is trying to be more independent often, and the woman is trying to be more of the connected partner. And it's the more longing kind of, which is translated as lustful. Longing is probably better, but lustful, that is the Sanskrit translation that you often hear. So it's a fascinating study in the succinct qualities of the sun and moon as they relate to masculine and feminine energy.